And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the insipid and perfidious forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy, very rainy Thursday. Woke up this morning, looked outside, and I was pleased to see that it was raining. I've got a little sprinkler system problem going on at the house, and so any rain is appreciated. My yard was getting kind of brown, so
I never have a sprinkler system. I bought my wife a hose.
Oh Lord. Yeah. She's probably watching this morning.
You know, I wanted to grouse about the rain this morning.
Yeah.
And I got up, thought you really shouldn't. You should be grateful. And then I found the reason to grouse, and that was the wind.
Well, if you didn't...
I don't mind the rain, but I do tire of the wind very quickly.
Well, we didn't talk about that. You had kind of a wind disaster at your house.
Oh, yeah.
It knocked down a limb and knocked down your power pole.
Half a tree.
Yeah. Well, anyway, my friends, welcome to the program. We've got a great show in store for you. At the bottom of the hour, Nathan Winters is going to be joining us. He was the guy principally responsible for the big forum down in Cheyenne earlier this week. So we're going to talk to him, get his take on how things went. And there's also quite an extensive article in the Cow Pie about it. So we'll go over that too. But there are debates happening all over the place.
Debates or forums?
Well, there's been a lot of forums. There's been very few debates.
Yeah, that grouses me.
Well, okay, so what's the difference? A forum is where you get a bunch of people on stage and you just ask their opinion about something. Hey, what do you think about property taxes? Well, Dave, I think they suck.
You got plus or minus a minute, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Summarize what you would do about Southwest Asia.
Yeah, right. Can you please give me the history of U.S. foreign policy in Southeast Asia, and do it in a minute and a half,
and do it with a Henry Kissinger voice.
Yes.
But it's
and make sure you have the impression going on. All right. So what's the difference? A forum is basically you just ask candidates questions. A debate is a little bit different, in which you ask a question and you have two candidates, and the hope is both of them going back and you have some interaction between them. And the idea being that you learn something about the candidate. First, where they stand on an issue, but second, how well they can defend their beliefs. Because the thinking is, if you send your representative to Cheyenne or to D.C., that they'll be able to represent you. And when they present your position to the rest of their colleagues, that they'll be able to defend it, that they can argue for the merits of whatever issue that you're talking about. You see, you don't get that with the forum. I'm not saying that forums are unvaluable. I'm saying that they're different. And my opinion is most people avoid debates because they're afraid of confrontation. that they don't want to be put in a situation where they have to think on their toes, and that there's some I guess the word I'm looking for is prearranged contention between them. And what you do is you craft the question with the intention of creating friction between the two candidates. That there's two opposing sides to whatever issue you're bringing up, and you hope that the candidates or the participants in the debate will take either position. And, debates have a really long history in this country. Probably the most famous would be the Lincoln-Douglas debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. For an entire summer, they debated one issue, slavery. Now, I mean, that's a pretty big issue. I think we could all agree on that. But just think about that. An entire summer, they went back and forth. And sometimes they were together. Other times, one would deliver a speech over here, and the other one would respond over here. But the point being is that that voters got a really good handle on who was debating where and what their position was. And I mean, I think it's really important that you get candidates on stage and you press them, find out how they're going to do under pressure, because that gives you an indication of how they're going to represent you. Now, leading up to the debate, I think it's also important for the viewers or the people that are going to watch it to understand a little bit about the candidate. And so how do you do that? Well, you could spend hours and hours and hours on wildledge.gov looking at this bill and that bill. And I think that's invaluable. You really get to know, what the bill was about, who voted where. And I think that's tremendously valuable. However, it takes a heck of a lot of time. And so in Wyoming, there are a number of websites you can go look at that just kind of give you a snapshot of where a candidate is. One of those is Evidence-Based Wyoming. That's one of my favorites. That one tracks how often a legislator votes with either the Republican majority or the Democrat majority. And that's all that it tracks. And now you would think that would, that there would only be one type of data that you could get out of that. But the truth is, you can derive a lot of information from that. Where are they on specific issues? How often did the rest of their colleagues vote this way? Are they a follower?
Yeah.
Do they just follow the pack?
I like that one. There's one aspect of that you can get into a little bit that is basically how effective are they? Are they consistently winning?
Yeah.
On the winning side, or are they like Marilyn Conley?
Well, she doesn't even know where she's at, a full-blown communist. So anyway, there's a lot of data that you can get from there. And for me, and you've heard me mention this a lot on the show, that the most handy piece of information is how often do you side with the Democrats? And keep in mind that even in those numbers, there are times where even the most devout redcoat, if redcoats can be devout, how even they have to say, okay, I guess we'll vote with the Republicans this time. I mean, it's like one of those torturous things. Okay, maybe this one time I'll vote that way.
It's a Second Amendment issue on an election year. So.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Nobody can be anti-gun during an election. So that's Evidence-Based Wyoming. There's another one called WyoRhino. This one seems to be very popular. And the purported basis of this one is how often do you follow the Republican Party platform? For if you're running in a Republican primary, that's a pretty handy piece of information. Because if you're the guy like Nancy Case, I guess I should have looked this up before I said this, but if you're the guy like Nancy and you only follow the platform 10% or 20% or never, well, then maybe you're not a Republican. And so that one there is a pretty handy site. Now, the criticism of that one is that, well, they just cherry pick votes. Okay. And what they do pick 10 votes, and they just rate each legislator according to that. Now, the argument against that is, yes, they cherry pick votes, but are their results any different than any of the other rating sites? And the answer to that is no. Like, it doesn't really matter which methodology you use to rate your legislator or And it's kind of hard to rate a candidate if they don't have a voting record. But, there's only two possibilities there. Either A, they're all in it together, or B, it's accurate. And to be perfectly frank with you, I have no idea who runs WyoRhino. I've tried to figure it out. All the people that I know across the state, that is one of the better kept secrets. I don't even know. And so, but I really doubt that there's anybody else, that there's that many people that do know. There's another one, WyoVote. That one rates how conservative a legislator is versus how liberal. And the interesting thing about that is that group looks at every single roll call vote, and they've got a panel of people that say, is this vote conservative or is this vote liberal? So each one of those rating agencies give you a different piece of information.
Yeah, on that last one, the weakness is that sometimes people vote against a bill for different reasons,
Sure, yeah.
clear across the political spectrum. But a no vote gets treated like a no vote. And so then sometimes you see people who they voted against a lot of things because they wanted more.
Right,
right. That sort of thing.
Mike Yen is a good example
Yeah,
of that one.
yeah.
So last year, Mike Yen ended up number 5 on the list. And here's why. He voted no a lot. And so a lot of his liberal bills didn't make it to the floor, so he didn't get a chance to vote on those. And he's not going to vote for any conservative bill. And, of course, conservatives controlled the House, so he's not going to vote on those. And there was a lot of spending that had been killed with the supplemental budget that got kind of shoehorned in elsewhere. And say what you want about Mike Yen, but when it comes to procedure, most of the time he follows it. And so he voted no on a lot of those too. And so if you do that, you generally end up being more conservative. And that's why.
I would say this about Mike too. He does his homework. He works very hard.
Yeah, he does. I don't agree with anything.
He just comes from a very skewed worldview, in my opinion.
Interesting. I happened to show up at one of his legislative forums in Jackson, and it was Liz Storr, Andrew Byron, and Mike Yen. And as you can imagine, the question of the stupid check incident showed up in their forum, and Mike Yen looked right at me, and he said something to the effect of, well, that was unfortunate, and I'm glad we could move past it. And he didn't elaborate, knowing, of course, that whatever he said was going to hit my program the very next morning, which it did. So anyway, there's a number of rating scales, and then there are private organizations that they have their own agenda. And let me just use the John Birch Society. They have the Freedom Index, and they pick 6 votes. And it's and they rate legislators depending on those 6 votes. And one of the big criticisms of that one is one of those is always Convention of States. And the criticism of that is, well, that's in the Constitution. If I vote for Convention of States, that's automatically a constitutional vote, and I should be rated high for it. Well, in the view of the John Birch Society and me, for example, not for example, but me, that's a vote that, yes, it's in the Constitution, but it would successfully help destroy the Constitution. And so that one is a little bit of a weird one. Now, again, though, you can look at the Freedom Index, and the legislators that show up on the top of that one are the same ones that show up on the top of WyoRhino. They show up as very conservative on evidence-based Wyoming, and they show up on the top of WyoVote. And, the John Birch Society does not consult with WyoRhino in figuring out how they're going to rate their legislators. So that gives you a pretty good idea. And there's others, too. I should probably mention, like Club for Growth. Okay, they're like allegedly a pro-business outfit. They rate legislators on their own scale as to how pro-business they are. And there are a lot. The WEA has their own. So if you're allegedly a conservative and you show up on the top of the WEA index, you're a liar.
I think they rated me a 12 in their last one, and I felt really guilty about it. How did I screw?
How did you get 12?
Well, because I voted against the ESA.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was the right vote, by the way.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
But that's an example of what I was saying earlier about I voted for an entirely different reason than they stand for, but a no is a no. So
okay, now so that gives viewers, voters, a glimpse into what happens in the legislature, how their legislator is doing. But that is a different question than how do they respond under pressure. Okay, when there's real pressure applied, how is your legislator going to vote? And there are a number of people that get elected, and during the election, man, it's fire and brimstone from the back of the train car. They're the most conservative candidate since Barry Goldwater. They're more conservative than than William F. Buckley. But when they get to Cheyenne, that changes a little bit, and they end up voting kind of liberal. Why? Well, because you get down there, and Ken, maybe you can speak to this. There's a lot of pressure when you show up there. It's, hey, come with me. We're gonna go have dinner. We're gonna talk about this. And oh, come on, we really need this. You know, this is an important bill. It helps out rural hospitals, and we have to have state support for helping out these rural hospitals. Well, okay, but look at the Constitution and look at the platform, and does spending money on health care align with any of those?
yeah, there's also the aspect of if you want to be successful here, you got to learn to play the game,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's an insidious thing, but it's not wrong. Um,
Well, so can
so
you give
I'm
us
trying to define wrong.
well, so can you give us an example of like pressure that a new legislator might encounter when they first get to Cheyenne? Something that might change.
Yeah, if maybe not a great example specifically, but I can paint the picture. You know, I got involved in this primarily because I was outraged at the governor's reaction to COVID and how he tried to shut us
I think a
down.
lot of people.
And so I went there with a chip on my shoulder, and at the same time, there were a couple of other things that I had been concerned about for a long time that I just wanted to see happen. And if you speak about them in your campaign, somebody's likely to pick up on that and say, "Hey, you know, I happen to agree with you. I think we really need to do something about the University of Wyoming. But in order to do that, we're going to have to get so many votes, and these are going to be some key people you're going to need to talk to, and we've got to work on them." By the way, they're pretty keen on this or that,
Mm-hmm.
and not that those discussions happen a lot, but they do happen, and that is the nature of politics. The dark side of it. You can't just walk into things. I mean, ideally you should. You can't just walk into it and say, on every issue, I'm going to completely flush everything that's gone before, and I'm going to vote strictly according to the issues and not personalities. You get beat up by somebody enough, and you're very resistant to their ideas, even if they are a good idea.
Well, let me give you a perfect example, and you brought it up just a little bit ago. The ESA bill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the vast majority of conservatives in the House they thought that was a heck of a good idea. And it started out, I think, as a pretty good bill. And so you supported it, you know.
Hoping to make it better.
Right. And as I recall, you were with it all the way through first reading in Committee of the Whole. And then there was an amendment added to it. And that one created universal pre-K. And Ken here, you ended up being one of the very few people that voted against it.
Yeah, and I actually, the first vote or two, I still voted for it because there was hopes that we could remove it. And you don't want to lose a good thing too early. And there's also the idea of, you know, we have formed coalitions of like-minded people, and we try to advance an agenda together. So there is an element of that.
Okay, so here's why why I bring that one up.
Okay.
There are a number of legislators that they just kind of go along with the crowd because they think that either being conservative is cool, they want to be with the conservative group, or the other side, they want to be with the other cool kids and vote like a raging hair on fire liberal. And so they just end up going with the crowd. But when the chips are on the table and it's make or break time, do you vote with your principles or do you not? It's a very difficult thing to say, no, I know all you guys are voting this way, but you're wrong. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah. I'll tell you somebody else who's a good example of being able to do that is Lori Bratton. She does a tremendous amount of research on the bills, and sometimes I disagree with her. Sometimes she disagrees with me, but she stands by her principles and votes the way that she thinks she could, and I appreciate that about her.
Okay, so taking that into consideration, why then are debates important? Because when those issues come up and you don't have any note cards in front of you and it's in the rules, you can't have one of these, and your notes are somewhere over there on the table, how do you respond? And that is the point.
And being influential, generally the debates on the floor aren't going to change any minds. But I will tell you that I had Steve Karshman come to me on 3 different occasions and say, you changed my mind on that vote.
Mm-hmm.
How many times do you think Julie Jarvis has changed anybody's mind? Okay, she probably did change some minds where people were thinking, I could go along with it, and then the more she drones on, and this happens a lot. You get somebody up there that's passionate about something, and they don't know when to shut up.
Yeah.
And you start wasting people's time and trying their patience, and then it gets harder to win their vote.
Yeah.
So, being effective, being a people person, and there's also the ability behind the scenes. Some of us are built to be kind of showy and to be out front and to give those
I wouldn't
speeches.
know anybody like that.
No, I don't know anybody like that either. But then there are other people who you almost never see stand up. Chris Knapp might be an example.
Yeah.
You don't very often, although when he does, he's powerful, get up and speak. But you get back in committee and behind the scenes, and so it's a really interesting dynamic. And having been on the inside now for 4 years, I have a different perspective than a lot of people. Doesn't necessarily mean it's right, because everybody skews things in their own mind. But when I look at these rating sites, the vast majority of them, especially Doug's evidence-based Wyoming, they get it right.
Often.
Yep, they get it right.
And I think that's my point with those, is that by and large, all things being equal, on balance, they pretty well get it right, how people are going to vote. And so, a debate shows you a microcosm of perhaps how things might transpire on the floor. Is it exact? No. But most voters have never been to the Capitol in Cheyenne. You should, by the way, if you get a chance to go check out our $300 and some odd million building. It's gorgeous. You should go. Yeah. But most people don't. And most people don't know what that's like. They don't observe it. And so a debate is the only experience they have watching 2 potential legislators go back and forth. And that's the only experience they get. And that's one of the big reasons why it's important.
The best part about a debate is there are buzzwords that people use that maybe somebody on the outside, just a casual observer, wouldn't necessarily understand what's being said. And in a debate, opponents will have the opportunity to challenge each other's use of words.
Yeah.
And the first one that pops in my head wasn't really in a debate, but it was in the conversation that I had at the cow pie.
That was beautiful.
Yeah. People use words that they really shouldn't be using, or they twist meanings, or they say things because it sounds good, but they really don't mean it. And that's one of my pet peeves. Is you often hear people stand up and say, "Well, I want to listen. Yeah. I want to listen to the people in my district." You listen to the people in your district, you'll hear every side of the spectrum, and that is the biggest smokescreen answer. Yes, yeah, you want to listen, you want to hear, but ultimately it comes down to who you are, because people voted for you. They voted for your character. They voted for the way that you look at things, right or wrong. I've had people that say, I don't agree with you on everything, but I know where you're coming from, and I respect that, and I trust you. So
And the other thing that you don't see this all that often, but you'll see if a candidate is able to hold their temper, because I've in the 6 years I've been watching the legislature, there are a lot of
Or
times
the
where
slip board.
yeah, or the slip board. But there are a lot of discussions that happen on the floor that I'm listening to it and I'm like, ooh, I wonder how he's going to respond. That's a good one. But in a debate, you get a chance to see if somebody's going to blow their stack. The best example of that is that debate in Buffalo. And it was Brent Bean and Rex Ramel on the
Yeah.
stage. And I don't even remember what set Rex off. It was something about Brent's military service. Oh, I remember what it was. Rex accused Brent of not being the veteran that he said he was. And Brent very adeptly, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was very direct and to the point. And essentially he said, don't question my record. Well, Rex blew up. And it was a shouting match on the stage. Well, imagine what he would do when confronted with a legislator that isn't going to agree with him, that somebody that just says no, we're not going to do that. Imagine what that candidate would do. So there's a lot of different things that a debate shows the audience, and I think that they're all valuable. Do I think that they're entirely correct? No, but I think it gives you a snapshot into what might happen and how your candidate is going to respond. And, of course, we all like it when we can clearly say, my guy won. That's my take on debates. Now, right after the break, we're going to talk to Nathan Winters, who just ran a forum down in Cheyenne, and we're going to get his take on how he thinks his event went. We'll do that when we come back.
Are you watching what's happening in our country and asking, what can I do? Join the John Birch Society in Salt Lake City, June 6th, for a powerful one-day conference. The day includes a host of respected speakers, 2 meals, and meaningful connections. You'll gain clarity on the issues and walk away with practical steps you can take to your community. Reserve your seat today at jbs.org/SLC26. That's jbs.org/SLC26.
One of those speakers at the Salt Lake City event will be yours truly. That's right, my friends. I'm one of the keynote speakers at the JBS 2026 conference. So join me in Salt Lake City if you want to see me. The following ad was paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
You won't find him leading a horse out of a barn or leaning against a corral with the sun setting behind him, because Wyomingites don't need a candidate who creates a good photo op. What you will find is a hard-working, experienced leader who believes Wyoming should always come first. A conservative grounded in strong values and steady principles. Ready to lead Wyoming the right way. Brent Bean for governor.
Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of building for your property, you need to call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best in metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So it doesn't matter if it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or maybe a giant warehouse for your business. The 2 guys you need to call first are Marcos and Jesse. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out on their website, mortonbuildings.com. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. Thank you for watching the show. I'm your host, David Iverson. Of course, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by the big man upstairs. You know, everybody's got talents, Ken. And I think if you're not using them, it's kind of an insult to the God Almighty. I think you ought to use your talents, which is what I do.
Yeah, because God doesn't need them.
Well, no, I mean, he can do whatever he wants, right? He gives them to you so that you can make something with them.
Yeah.
So join me.
He can take them back.
This is true. This is true. And sometimes we're a little bit surprised when that happens.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one of the guys that he organized a pretty large forum in Cheyenne is Nathan Winters. So Nathan, welcome to Cowboy State Politics.
Hey, it's good to see you. I'm so glad to be with you.
Yeah. This is the first time you've been on the show, isn't it?
I think it is. You know, we've talked about this for quite some time, getting together, and we have a lot of stuff we enjoy in common. But we have been bouncing all over the place, and so it's good to actually get with you.
Yeah. So why don't you take a minute or two and tell my audience about yourself?
Well, I had the joy of pastoring in Thermopolis, Wyoming for a number of years, and in that time, God also gave me the opportunity to represent House District 28, which was a little larger than the state of Connecticut, by the way, a big area in the Bighorn Basin. I represented them in the Wyoming legislature. And God did a wonderful thing. I ran for state auditor 8 years ago, and God blessed me by allowing me to do well and not win. Because out of that, we had the joy of founding the Wyoming Family Alliance, originally known as Family Policy Alliance of Wyoming, the public policy partner of years ago, what was called Focus on the Family Action. And also a classical school, a Hillsdale College curriculum classical school down here. I still chair that as well. And so a lot of wonderful things have happened in that move now to Cheyenne, Wyoming, trying to help bring a fivefold vision to Wyoming, where we have a revitalized electorate, where we have people who actually know what's going on. Secondly, seeing revitalized people who are in elected office. I think that's very important. Thirdly, revitalized families. That's something that's crucial. Revitalized education system, because so many things have gone wrong over the last 50 years or so.
A whole bunch of them.
Oh, yeah. And then lastly, a revitalized, and we don't get to talk about this as much, but non-governmental organizational life. So when you look back at Alexis de Tocqueville and the early country, they didn't believe that the government was the be-all and end-all. They believed in having strong civilization, and that meant having strong non-governmental organizations. And so those 5 areas we focus on quite a lot here at Wyoming Family Alliance, and that's where my life has been the last 7 years.
You know, interestingly enough, you running the Classical Academy, I'm pretty sure you're aware of this, but the very first guy to suggest that the government ought to run education was Andrew Johnson. And I mean, most people say it was Jimmy Carter because he started the Department of Education. But I find this point interesting because one of the things that Andrew Johnson was known for was being a drunk. And when he suggested, you know, well, maybe the government ought to run education, most people looked at that and said, "You've been hitting the bottle too much, man." As we know, it didn't happen until the 70s.
Like the DMV, and that's the thing that we've watched over the years. And I appreciate the fact that you bring that up, because when you look, you mentioned both Andrew Johnson and Jimmy Carter, 2 of the most failed presidents in American history.
Big time.
And their legacy has been devastating. Not only that, when you look at backwards into the history of the education system. So Thomas Mann, way back in the 1820s, his idea of actually having some sort of education system where people who were newly brought into the country could be taught the basics of civic values. You know, it's one of those things where I don't think he realized just how dangerous it was as he began to try to centralize education in small areas. Because by the time John Dewey comes along in the 1890s, oh my goodness, John Dewey, I gave a talk on this a while back in North Carolina, but he has this little booklet called A Common Faith. And in the Common Faith, He describes it as there is no God, there is no soul, therefore there is no, I'm paraphrasing at this point, basis for ethics. And you look at that, the kind of non-ethical kind of culture that he has, his legacy is left behind. He's known as the father of modern public education. You look at that, you can see that this is something that didn't happen overnight. This is something that we have to work hard to push back against right now. And these are some of the efforts, both at Wyoming Family Alliance and then at the classical school, we've been doing.
Yeah, I'm glad that we started out the conversation this way, because I don't know if you saw yesterday's program, but we had a long discussion about is it possible to do post-secondary education, that is college, outside of our university system. And so if you get a chance, go watch that. It was a fascinating discussion. So the reason I wanted to have you on, Nathan, is you just got done with a big, gigantic forum in Cheyenne. Tell me about that. How do you think it went?
You know, first of all, when we decided to do this, we didn't know exactly how it would go, and we were truly blessed by the response. First, we charged just a little bit, so because we did provide hors d'oeuvres and it provided for room costs, things like that. But we actually were not only sold out, we were overbooked.
Ah, cool.
And it was an utterly packed room. And we had all three governor candidates. Of course, Harriet was working hard in Washington, D.C., so she wasn't able to come. But she was able to answer the questions that we asked on video. And so in that particular race, we did give the questions out to everyone involved early. The rest of the races we didn't. But that was just so that we could maintain that fairness there. And then we had 7 of the U.S. House of Representatives candidates.
Big job.
My goodness, it was a lot. We were trying to think through the calculus of this. If you ask one question to 7 candidates and you give them 2 minutes a piece to respond, and I take, say, about a minute or so to ask the question, we're talking, that's a quarter of an hour for one question. So we really tried to sweat through that. We were thinking, do we ask different questions of different people? Anyway, it was pretty challenging, but you know, I really think not only was the response great, the response afterward, I think, was good, because we were asking questions that don't often get asked of candidates. A lot of times people want to go straight towards the technocratic question. And I want to know what's in their heart. What are the moral convictions? Here's the first one we asked of all of them. I'll just phrase it to you. It was this: the phrase separation of church and state is frequently invoked in debates surrounding public policy. Some choose to ignore the original meaning of that phrase, which was to ensure that there was no established, quote, Church of America, and instead imply that people of faith should set aside their moral convictions when governing, even though all laws reflect someone's moral beliefs. Do you, if elected, would you govern according to moral convictions informed by faith, or should those convictions be set aside in public office? And do you believe elected officials bear a moral responsibility for the laws they advance, oppose, or permit? And would you please explain your reasoning?
Ooh,
Now,
toughy.
I tell you what, I want to get right at the heart of what people believe. And I said this in my opening comments at in the program. When you look backwards in history and you think of the Aztec civilization, we don't ask what was their tax policy.
Right.
We care far more about the kind of culture, how they viewed human life. Did they cut people's hearts out and toss them downstairs, or did they actually believe that life had value? And obviously, when you look at that across history and civilizations, right now the kind of questions we are trying to ask are the ones that future civilizations will judge Wyoming by. And so, yeah, these were different questions than people normally get when running in a campaign.
Well, and I love that question, in just the way that you phrased it, because interestingly enough, it goes to something that I always say, is that how you vote is who you are. That you vote according to your convictions, whether you realize it or not. And often, one of the problems in politics, I think, I'm sure of this, is that we have politicians who vote a certain way, and the policy goes really bad, and at the end, they're the people that are like, I just voted, right? That there's no responsibility for it later. And those end up being the policies that are pretty destructive, like destructive to the family, to how we interact with people. So I
Really
love that question.
thought of it this way, but I want to try this out on you, David.
Sure.
What I see that as is political Gnosticism. So forgive me, this is the first time I'm thinking in real time here with you. But
Mhm.
what I mean by that, Gnosticism, the idea that the soul and the body are somehow separate, or that
Right.
you can divide yourself in some way. And I think that's such a dangerous thing. It's a little bit like way back when Democrats would say things like, well, I don't personally believe in abortion, but I would never force that on anybody else. And now, of course, they don't even say that anymore. But what you saw there was a sort of political Gnosticism
Mhm.
where they are saying that I have some moral beliefs, but I'm certainly not going to use them when I make decisions that matter. And I appreciate what you said just a few minutes ago, because all decisions are based on some sort of moral framework.
Mhm.
Uh, you really can't have an amoral framework. What we see is usually it turns toward an immoral framework. And so moral reasoning is at the heart of every decision.
Well, and I personally think that we are kind of in an era of like what I would describe as political nihilism, right? That there is no God. I mean, or that we have people in office that they might say something like, well, I believe in a higher power. I don't know that he controls everything, but there's something up there. Well, that's just not true. You and I know that. And so, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. When legislators take their oath of office, or when they join the military. I mean, God is invoked in almost every sector of our society. And so when you have a candidate that suggests that maybe their decisions on the floor of the legislature are somehow disconnected from the moral implications of them, I find that very, very troubling, and that you can somehow separate your intellect from your spirit, or your body from your spirit. I think it's a very dangerous idea, because it allows you to do things like you said, Nathan, that, well, I don't believe in abortion, but I would never push that on somebody else. Well, that's bullcrap. You're in a position to make a decision, for your constituents, and so what you believe ought to be reflected in your decisions. And if it's not, well, man, you're going to vote for all sorts of crazy things that end up being really harmful.
The thing that also is frustrating, I think, to many people of faith, and I'll just bring his name up if you don't mind.
Yeah,
James Tallarico.
Yeah. Oh boy.
So let me just explain this, and I'm going to write on this sometime soon, because this has been burning in my heart for a long time. There are some people who invoke faith, and then they actually invoke the Christian faith in particular, who clearly don't believe anything that an Orthodox Christian throughout history, I mean that is little o Orthodox, just someone who actually believes the Bible, they don't believe anything like that. Back in 1923, there was a professor. He was so frustrated at Princeton Theological Seminary, he went off and started Westminster Theological. His name was J. Gresham Machen. And he wrote a little book called Christianity and Liberalism. And his point was, liberal Christianity is not Christian.
Exactly.
They'll use much of the terminology of Christianity, but they don't believe any of it. And no Christian in history would recognize liberal Christianity as Christianity. And so when I look at someone like James Tallarico, a lot of times people want to hammer Christians for being Christian and caring. And yet at the same time, what he's doing is a false kind of caring that really is unchristian. And so I look at that. There's a lot of terms that we're throwing around here, but you're giving me the opportunity to really jump into some things I care deeply about, and the reason why I believe God has called me into this realm.
Well, and so one of the things that you see in the Wyoming legislature, and you know this because you were there, there are a lot of people that say, well, I'm a Christian when they're campaigning. And this is my biggest frustration, that when folks go out and they are standing on a doorstep, they say things like, well, of course I'm a Christian. I believe in guns. Taxes are too high. Abortion is bad. And, I'm a conservative, so you should vote for me. And then when they go to Cheyenne, they end up voting for stuff like, I don't know, it seems okay to me that we could have boys in women's sports, or that, we have to have exceptions when it comes to abortion, things that are very clearly not Christian. And we have allowed, in my not so humble opinion, we have allowed those things to infect our politics to a point where words don't mean anything anymore. And I think your point of that there are many things that get categorized as Christian that are very much in contradiction to the Bible, and to what any practicing Christian would say is Christian. I mean, there are a number of denominations. Over the weekend, I read an article about how there's a denomination, and forgive me if I forget which one it is right now, but they're having a debate whether or not their priests can have multiple partners or not, or if they just have to be monogamous. And this is a mainstream American denomination. Okay, none of those, that debate doesn't figure into it. And so we're in this weird spot where that nothing matters, that words don't mean things. And I appreciate what your group is doing in saying, no, God has had from the very beginning an influence on this country. And I happen to personally believe that the Constitution is the inspired work of God. There's no other way it could have happened unless he was involved. And I think the transcripts of the Constitutional Convention clearly reflect that. But from the beginning to right now, and if you're a believer, you know in your heart that God is intimately involved in everything. And so to have any sort of political debate that divorces God out of the equation, I think there's a number of problems with it, but I just don't think that you're having an actual debate about the policies that affect people's lives.
Well, I will say this, and this is why I'm so appreciative. I've talked around the country on this topic as well. Now, let me just say, my background is in church history, and so and then the history of philosophy. So I've spent a lot of time on these subjects. But so the word literally inspiration or God breathed, that is applied very technically to Scripture. But what I do appreciate about the founding fathers is they were steeped in Scripture. One of the beautiful classes I took just about 2 years ago goes through the thinking of those who really the United States of America is a reflection of the Scottish Enlightenment and a bunch of theologians who asked the question, what would a culture look like if it truly was trying to be good, true, and beautiful and live those things out? And you look at what they called that, frankly, this is Thomas Reed, University of Glasgow in the 1860s and 70s, 80s. He called that common sense. Now, common sense, of course, became a widely used term in early America because of Thomas Paine's work.
Sure.
But common sense has an actual definition to it, and it's that what Aristotle called, or Cicero, the sensus communis. It's the understanding that there is truth baked into the heart of mankind that is undeniable. We know in our heart of hearts, and this is the reason why the culture is shifting, in spite of all of the efforts of the left, people know that boys don't belong in girls' sports.
Yes.
That men and women, this is a binary sort of thing. And actually, God designed it because we are mutually compatible. We work well together that way. And it actually is demeaning to try to tell women the best life they could ever have is to try to become a man. And so you look at that, the Christian faith is a beautiful thing our founding fathers were steeped in as they built this country out. And that's the reason why we're now the oldest republic that has ever been, 250 years of existence. The question is, will we sustain it? Yeah,
well, that's a good question. You brought up the question of truth, and it reminds me of the a new joke that and maybe it's a joke, maybe it's not. But when I was in college, I studied a lot of philosophy, right? And if you want to get a philosophy professor going, you say, what is truth? And right, and it'll be this long dissertation, and well, this person says this, and Kant says this, and Jean-Paul Sartre, it's he doesn't know that there's anything,
Yeah.
But
There.
if you ask and I went to Regis University, so it's a Jesuit school. Now, if you go to your advisor, who most people had a priest as their advisor, it's, Catholic Jesuit school, and you ask them the same question, it'd take them about 2 sentences. Well, that's easy. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, period. So I'd like to get back to the debate. You and I could probably talk for hours, or back to the forum, rather. So question, what do you think was the high point, and could you describe it? And what do you think was the low point of your forum?
Well, okay. I'll say this. When it comes to a high point, let me just, every time Harriet Hageman speaks, one can tell. I'll give you a framework, and I'll be publishing on this as well. We actually put this on the inside. It was a letter from me on the inside of the agenda when people came. There are 3 things I think a person should look for in a candidate, and I am getting to your question, but I want to build that up so that I can help explain it. First, do they have the knowledge base to know what is good, true, and beautiful? And leadership has to start with an understanding that reality is, and a leader who can't distinguish truth from falsehood is someone who is not going to, not only will that person fail because they're in a position of leadership, they're going to wind up leading others astray. So you need to ask, have they read a book or two? Secondly, then, if they do know something, do they have the courage to actually fight for it? Because someone who has a lot of knowledge and no courage is just like the people lined up opposite the valley of Elah there, watching Goliath come out every day. They knew that guy was bad and that they were on the right side. They didn't have the courage to go out and face him. And so that's not a leader as well. Knowledge alone isn't not enough. But then the third thing, and I borrowed this from the Old Testament Hebrew word for wisdom, and it's shokama. But it carries at the heart of it the idea of practical skillfulness. And so do they have those 3 things? Do they have a knowledge base? Do they have the courage to fight? And then thirdly, do they have skillfulness? That word in the ancient Hebrew literally is the original impression is the skill with a sword. Have they done sword training? Are they skilled? Anybody can go out and just charge the enemy. Can they charge the enemy and win? And so when you look at those 3 things, let me just say, every time I've ever heard Harriet Hageman speak, and I'll never forget the first time, it was in 2013, and she came and spoke on land policy, and she absolutely knows what she's talking about. She has demonstrated a ton of courage in what she's talking about. And then thirdly, she is extremely skillful, and you can see that. So you can just tell as you ask people questions and you hear their answers, she's phenomenal.
Okay. So there's the high point.
Yeah. The low point was watching, and I won't get into the particulars of exactly who, and I'll tell you why here in a moment, but was watching a few people tap dance around certain questions. For instance, when it came to the question of when does human life begin, we purposely phrased this question in this way. I'll just read it to you. It's real short.
Sure.
Abortion is the intentional act of ending the life of another human being while in the womb. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, do you support any exceptions to legal protections for unborn children? Now, obviously, the premise of that question is the child in the womb is just simply an unborn child. And are you going to try to dance around that? And we did watch a little of that several occasions. And that was unfortunate.
Now, not to interrupt you, Nathan, but was that pointed out? Did another candidate say, okay, now hold on a minute, let's go back to this?
There was on occasion people, and by the way, you'll get the full video here very soon. We had it professionally recorded so that you can use these clips and all those other things. We did it in a way that was where we tried to be even. We sent out the raw footage to all the campaigns who came, and then we are going to kind of cut out the little clips of changing the stage and all that other stuff. But we're going to have that on our website here in just the next couple of days. And you can see all of these for yourself. But yeah, there were a couple occasions where, especially in the House of Representatives race, which was probably the most action-packed with all those candidates, where people did push back on others. And I think you'll find that very interesting.
Now, I want to go back to something that you mentioned in your letter that you included in your program. And one of the things I appreciate about Wyoming politics is you often have a wide variety of people that just say, I'm going to run for this office, and I'm going to convince my neighbors to vote for me, and we're going to go down there. And what you end up getting is some people who are very educated. You'll have some people that are, it might be the local carpenter. I wouldn't know anybody like that, Ken. Or you might have the guy who's been ranching his entire life, and he's ticked off about property taxes. And now one of my favorite legislators, he's very well read in the Bible. He knows it backwards and forwards. But if you were to stack him up against somebody who has a university training, he's clearly not that guy. However, when a complicated issue comes up, often he'll say something like, well, this reminds me of being out on my tractor. And here's what I was doing in my field, and this is exactly what this situation creates. And it is two things. He puts them in such simplistic terms so that everybody can understand them. But I think that he also is able to convey, he has this skill, if we can use that word, to be able to say, look, the problems that we talk about down here are no different than the problems that I face out in my field. Because, and one of the more important things for me is, do you believe in God? And if you're a rancher in Wyoming, you better believe in God or you're going to go broke pretty quickly.
Right.
So my question for you is, those things that you mentioned, have you read a book or two? Are you learned? Are you concerned that we too often lean in favor of those people with a classical education and disregard those folks who may not be, who probably haven't read Waldo Emerson, but they've read the Book of Numbers, which that's kind of a difficult one for me. So my question for you is: do you think that too often we end up artificially creating a sense of elitism in Cheyenne, and we disregard those people who are, the carpenter or the rancher or the store clerk?
I do think that happens. We do see that in American history. I think we see that in Wyoming as well. And I think I know the legislator you're talking about, because every time I talk to him, I call him brother, because he is like a brother to me, and I've known him for a long time. It's one of the wisest men I know. One of the things I pointed out to him, because if a person studies the Word of God, they have everything they need. It was in Psalm 119 where David wrote, "You have made me wiser than all my teachers because I love your law." Someone who actually has wrestled with truth and then sat and pondered that truth over a long period of time, they're wiser than so many people around them. But it does take the actual reading of the Word of God. So the point I would say is, one doesn't have to know the difference between Plato and Plotinus to understand what truth looks like. Our founding fathers, no, actually, let me take that back. Many of them were extremely, extremely brilliant and had read a lot. On the other hand, you take someone like Abe Lincoln. Abe Lincoln didn't have formal training, but
Right.
The man was an autodidact. He read everything he could get his hands on. And that legislator you're talking about, the reason why I have been so excited about him in leadership positions and everything else is because the man does read. He has a deep well of knowledge. Even if he didn't go hear some professor say it, the man is truly someone who, like Lincoln, not only has read, but then has pondered. And that's the other thing about education sometimes people forget.
So another question about your forum. What did you learn about the candidates? Why don't you tell me this? What was the most surprising thing that you learned from all of those candidates? Or did we learn anything at all?
Well, no, I think we did. But I think a lot of times this sounds horrible because I know it's misused. You know how people use the term vibes for everything?
It drives me
Um,
bonkers.
I know, I know. And yet at the same time, what you can tell when you ask pretty straightforward, pretty challenging questions is looking at how they answer the question or whether they try to deflect. So I think when we get to some of these, I was really impressed with how a couple of them um, really exhibited that they belonged on the stage. Some I didn't know. Um, well, I'm trying not to use names, but almost did. Uh, there
You're
was
on the
this one
program where
fellow.
we name names, Nathan.
I know, and I'll tell you the reason why I'm not. It's partly because here at Wyoming Family Alliance, I work so hard to try to make sure that the actual principles, our North Star sort of stuff, is lifted up so that people actually know what we're fighting for. And then secondly, like on wyovoterguide.com, which will come out very soon, we're putting out the information that people give to us, and then also we have a team of people who are digging into what they've said on the internet and stuff. A lot of times, if they don't fill out a questionnaire, we still want to know where they stand. And so I'm working so hard to make sure that the information, the good decision making material comes out. And so that's the reason why maybe later in the campaign season, I might talk about that. But there was this one fellow there, uh, younger fellow, probably the youngest guy on the stage. And there was a very deep level of knowledge there. And I think a lot of people walked away thinking, wow, that is a capable person. So you look across um, the stage, and there were some, even though they may not be someone's first choice, if they happen to make it there. And this is, by the way, something that concerns me and has for a long time. In a lot of these races here in Wyoming, we it seems like everybody comes out and runs, and so the winner often is someone who has maybe less than 30% or around 30% of the vote. And so we're not actually guaranteed that they're the person that has um, the most support in the state. It just they happen to come out first in a very too large of a field.
Yeah, I
It's
wouldn't
a
mention
question.
any names. Mark Gordon.
Well, I watched that one very, very closely. And in that race, we had, of course, Harriet Hageman, Foster Free, Sam Galiotis. We had a couple of others, all of whom were very, very competent and conservative. And you look at that. I remember 16 years ago, it was Rita Meyer, Ron Michaeli, and Matt Mead. Two-thirds of the votes went to Rita Meyer and Ron Michaeli, just
Right.
under two the vote, and about a third of them went to Matt Mead. So we have this long history of where I think we need to be very thoughtful as conservatives in these races ahead of us.
Yeah, well, two thoughts about that. One, I get really disappointed when, the person who wins doesn't have a majority of the vote. And I think a lot of people probably feel exactly the same way. Mark Gordon, Matt Mead. I mean, you're right. We have a long history of the person winning getting a really, really small percentage of the vote. And with the state legislature, too, there's several examples of that also. However, there are races where you have a number of candidates, and there's one who ends up being, in the end, having a pretty large base of support. And I'm just waiting for that one person to just kind of run away with it. Kind of like the high school track race where there's all the contestants lined up and one guy just blazes away and
Yeah.
runs them all into the ground. So, all right. Well, Nathan, I appreciate your time on the program. We had a great discussion, I thought. So you going to do some more of this, or was this the one and done, or are you guys going to try to do another one during the
No,
general?
we're gonna look also at these other statewide candidates as well. Our form might be a little bit different. We may try to do that in a smaller format and just do it digitally so that we can get through all of those races. But coming up, we do have the Wild Voter Guide. Now, again, we don't get into the Second Amendment, even though I'm pretty passionate about it. We don't get into tax policy, economics, and all that, even though I'm pretty passionate about that too. We try to stay very focused on life, religious liberty, parental rights, education freedom, those kind of issues that often others don't pick up. So that particular voter guide is one that's going to be very helpful for people as they also then look at other ones that will touch on those other issues. But that's coming out soon, and so we'll stay active all throughout the summer, and also praying for people too. We're always asking for people to join us in prayer because it matters deeply.
Yeah, everybody should be. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Just go to wyomingfamily.org, wyomingfamily.org. They can call us here. I don't have any books on my shelves, or very few, because we just moved into a wonderful new headquarters just 2 blocks north of the Capitol building. So we'd love for you to stop by on Central. But they can go to wyomingfamily.org. They'll find a phone number there. They can call us or send us an email. And then later, wyovoterguide.com is where they can get that information.
All right, Nathan. Well, I appreciate it, my friend. Well, I'm sure we'll be talking later on in the summer. And thanks again.
Anytime. Thanks so much, David.
All right. Well, that was Nathan Winters of the Wyoming Family Alliance. And I think we had a great discussion. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue on with the program. I know that you think it's spring and that the weather is just going to continue to warm up and you don't have to worry about snow or ice or 30-degree temperatures anymore. In case you've forgotten, this is Wyoming, my friend, and that sort of thinking doesn't work here. 1 minute, it could be 75 and sunny, and 10 minutes later, snow. Whatever the weather, you need a pair of socks that'll keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. And if you happen to run into that spring snowstorm, you'll stay nice and toasty warm. Well, your feet anyway. To get you a pair, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. These are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell.
Iceland, France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the last year and a half been more than you could bear? Well, if it has, you've come to the right place. Call my friend Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. This program is expanding faster than, well, anybody, I know. Cowboy State Politics Live, the Cowboy State Politics Podcast, and the Open Range Record. Don't forget about that.
One of these days you're going to have to answer that question.
How fast is it expanding?
Yeah, faster.
Nobody knows, man. It is so quick that nobody can measure
And you're going
it.
to have to leave Oprah out of it.
No? Well, okay, yeah. I mean, it's certainly expanding faster than she is. I mean, okay, was that a little...
That's a challenge.
I know. Was that a little below the belt? Yeah, a little
There's
bit.
a lot below her belt.
Well, welcome back to the program, my friends.
I'm a bad person.
It's Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. Thank you for watching. So we just finished talking with Nathan Winters about his forum down in Cheyenne. And, you know, he's right. It would be very difficult to run any sort of forum or debate or whatever it is with that many people. And one of the constraints is you just don't have enough time to get every candidate's thoughts on whatever the question it is, which is why for our debate on July 16th, and ours is going to be a debate, it is not going to be a forum. And even if I have to have, like, I don't know, pitchforks and torches or something to force these candidates to debate, that is what's going to happen. And so to switch things up a little bit, we're running a poll.
Before you run away from that.
What, pitchforks and torches?
No. I just want to say that's one of the things I love about what we do here on this show, is we give people enough time to put out enough rope to hang themselves or
to make their
to
point.
shine.
Yeah,
one or the other.
I mean, I thought that I had a great conversation with Nathan.
Yeah.
You know, and so, I mean, that's one of the advantages to doing a program like this. We don't really have any time constraints. If we wanted to go till noon, though Ken would probably grab the nearest broomstick and beat me over the head with it, we could. Well, anyway, back to the debate on the 16th. The Open Range Record is sponsoring a congressional and a gubernatorial debate. And so the way that we're going to handle the congressional debate is we're running a poll, and it's available on openrangerecord.com. It's a post pinned to the top, and you'll see it. It says you decide. And so here are and what we're doing is the top 5 candidates will be invited to the debate. And this is where things sit right now. And as you can see, it's not, it's pretty well the same, although you can see the votes for Freeze, Bo Beitman, Jillian Balow, and Frank Chapman. They're all kind of starting to even out a little bit. And then you have some folks down on the tail end, Kevin Christensen, Reed Reisner, Geralt, and Richard Dodson, and Keith Goodenough. But now what I haven't done with this debate or with this poll is I have not eliminated I haven't pushed the button to eliminate all the double votes. So I don't know if there's folks who have voted multiple times. There's a function in our poll that all I got to do is hit a button, and it'll tell you exactly where, you know, 1 vote per device. That's it. You don't get to vote for your guy 50 times and have it mean anything. So I haven't done that, but that's where the poll sits at this 10 seconds. It's going to be a great event down at the Rialto Theater on July 16th, and we'll be releasing more details about it in the coming days. It should be a pretty good event, and so can't wait to tell you about it.
For the Sheridan people, tell them about the one on the 14th.
Oh, yeah. So in Sheridan County, the Sheridan County Republican Party is going to put on a debate on July 14th. And I think this one's going to be a heck of a lot of fun because it is going to be each candidate and their opponent. And so, for example, Melissa Butcher will be taking on our good pal, Agent 29, Ken Pendergraft, and it'll just be mano a mano, one-on-one, and we'll do all of those legislative races in the same night.
It'd be mano e womano.
Yeah, well, whatever. However you want to say it. But one-on-one.
No women in men's sports.
I hope that she goes after you for that one. You deserve it.
Bring it. I do deserve it.
On the stage, man.
Like I said a few minutes ago, you know, you have time to put out enough rope to hang yourself.
No, you do a good job of that.
Yeah.
So anyway, on the 14th, we're going to have all of those legislative debates. Now, here's one thing I do want to point out. If you are a candidate and there's a debate scheduled and you choose not to show up, first of all, what are you scared of? Second, what that should tell voters, in my not so humble opinion, is that you're not willing to take on the hard fights. right? So the guy you're running against, you won't stand up on the stage and debate with him. I find that totally to be weak tea, weak sauce.
I think, though, that you have to temper that with who's setting up the debate.
Okay, all right. I'll give you
If
a
the League of
little bit
Women
of rope on
Voters
that
puts
one.
up a debate and invites me, I'm not going.
See, and
I'm not.
I'm totally of a different opinion. I'll walk in there, shoulders back, head up, and take them on.
Well, I have done that with the Chamber of
You have.
Commerce
This
for
is
the last several years, and proven that that's not really the issue. But especially in a short cycle like this one, candidates have a very limited amount of time to reach people, and I find that many times you go to these events and it's the same 35, 50, 100
Yeah.
faces that you see everywhere. You already know exactly how everybody in that room is going to vote, and you could go out and spend a few hours on the campaign trail and probably do yourself some more good. So there are some considerations when you sit down and decide, am I going to accept an invitation? 'Cause you
Subject
get-
myself to this
yeah,
abuse.
you get a lot of invitations, not just to forums, very few to debates. There are almost none of those held. And a lot of forums and a lot of questionnaires. And I know that some of the agencies sending out questionnaires, the only thing they want to do is find something to use against you.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. And you're right. There are very few debates, actual debates. But I think the ones that really irritate me are if a debate is being put on by the Republican Party of your county, and you claim to be a Republican, you better show up. And if you don't, it says volumes about you. And the biggest one of the biggest takeaway of that should be, you're not really a Republican, right? If you are a Republican and you're scared to walk onto a Republican stage to answer questions from the Republican Party, the subject of which would probably be the Republican Party platform, or at least all related to it, you shouldn't have any fear of that.
There are county GOP establishments around the state that are not friendly to conservatives.
This is true.
They're not friendly even to the platform.
Well, then maybe you should walk in there and correct them.
And so if I happen to live in a county where I knew the county party was averse to my positions, that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to go in and walk on the platform.
Yeah.
I'm going to tout the Republican platform. And if you have problems with that, why are you calling yourselves Republicans?
Exactly. Right. And we
try
do
to
have
draw that
counties like that.
distinction.
So
we
Natrona
do.
County might be one of those. Sweetwater
Sweetwater.
County.
Teton.
No, I disagree.
Well,
okay. So that one maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
it's
is
kind of going back and
interesting
forth a
dynamic,
little
yeah.
bit there, but I really think that if it's put on by the Republican Party, and even if it's controlled by a bunch of redcoats, I think what you should do is, like you said, Ken, walk in there with a copy of the platform and just
every answer.
Every answer.
Every
By
answer
the
comes
way,
from the
this is
platform, yeah.
plank number 11, and I don't, for the record, I don't have them memorized. I know generally, but anyway, I mean, if you're the candidate that's not going to show up, I think that's really weak. Frankly, nobody should vote for you if you're not willing to do that. And I've heard rumors that there's some counties where the whole slate of candidates are just not going to show up. And man, if you live in those counties and your candidate doesn't show up, or the guy running for your district, you really ought to be making some phone calls, I think. Anyway,
get a drink.
I know. I got coffee right in front of me. All right, so let's continue on with the program. I think we pretty well covered the forum, so I'm not even going to talk about this voluminous cow pie article. But pretty much it just goes down, kind of what happened. I sort of glanced at it this morning, and it's kind of just a blow by blow. If you can, okay. So to their credit, I don't think they injected a lot of their own biases.
Okay, who's
into
the
here.
they? Who wrote that one?
Well, I erased the author, but I'm sure it's our pal. I can tell you here in just a second. Let's see. And I love the title. Wyoming U.S. House candidates face Christian lobby. Swap war stories. And that's Claire. So let's move on. Now, there's an interesting piece from Matt Taibbi, who is an investigative journalist. You probably first heard of him with the Twitter files. Everybody remember those? where all of the documents came out about what Twitter was doing during the presidential election? Well, he has a piece, and I want to posit this question: is Matt Taibbi right? And I'll tell you about it here in just a second. He says, and the title of his piece is American Elections Are a Joke. So my question is Matt Taibbi right? Let me know in the comments if you think he is. So here's what he says. Quote, on California election night last week, Los Angeles mayoral candidate Nithya Raman gave a rambling address C-SPAN still has listed as, quote, a concession speech. The first explained the long odds facing Raman. Quote, they came at us with everything they had, the corporate landlords, City Hall insiders, and the corporations who have spent years making sure City Hall worked for them and not the people. These powerful interests spent millions of dollars against this little campaign. Then came the mega machine. They saw an opportunity in Los Angeles to buy a foothold in our beautiful city and advance a dark agenda. They poured money and from all over the country. Now, after explaining all the reasons that she might not have delivered for, quote, our gay and trans siblings, Raman collapsed in tears. I hope you know, she said, hand over heart, that everything every person in this room is fighting for in this campaign has been about building a city that's worthy for you. Now, at that point, Raman was a distant third-place finisher that night. A week later, she's ahead of Republican Spencer Pratt and may be the favorite to beat incumbent Karen Bass, who she got her butt whooped numerically in the post-election period, and give the Democratic Socialist Party strongholds in America's two biggest cities. This has prompted accusations of corruption that are beset, unproven, which is why papers like the New York Times and others are headlining with Donald Trump's influence. The United States now has, bar none, the world's dumbest election system. The rest of the world must look on in awe as it wonders how is it that the world's richest and most heavily armed country can't count. Even if no one is cheating, it looks horrible. If America were a face, it'd sprout a golf ball-sized herpes sore every election day. This has been our reality since COVID, and contrary to popular belief, it's not strictly a blue-red issue, since some of our worst elections have been Democratic primaries. Even the idiotic new feature is on display in California. So, is he right that well, a couple of things. Is he right that California's election is representative of the entire country? I don't think that he is, because I think that there are bright spots to where you actually can have an election that is, above board. There are many of those in Wyoming that I think that is the case. However, even in Wyoming, we do have some things that might be a little questionable. Let me just give you posit a theory. Okay, so if you take one county, and there are historically, like for 20 years, precincts that have voted conservative the entire time, and then you have a candidate that comes along there's no question that he's the conservative, and in that county he doesn't win a single precinct. Now, I'm not saying anything happened. I'm saying that's suspect. That, to me, that raises some eyebrows and says, now, wait a minute. This precinct has voted for the conservative candidate for the last 20 years. And this time they vote for the liberal? Yeah, I don't know. To me, that raises questions. So I guess the question for all of you is, are our election systems a joke? And I think in some areas he's right.
So I'm going to beg a little bit of leniency from you. I realize you are the grand omnipotent stomper.
I'm not omnipotent,
in this.
But this
I'm going to qualify that in this program. Yeah, it's not Friday.
That's true. It is not Open Line Friday yet.
So yeah, folks, think about that question that has just been posited. But there was another comment, and I'm going to put it up on the screen, and I would like a chance to respond to that. So Tony has said Wyoming's oath of office has had "So help me God" removed. I want to respond to that, and you're probably going to be surprised at what I say.
Okay, let's hear it.
And I say good.
Oh.
Same thing with the Pledge of Allegiance,
Mm.
one nation under God.
Okay.
I struggle with under God there because I don't believe that it's true. This is not a nation that is in subjection to God. A nation that's in subjection to God would not slaughter millions of babies, etc., etc. I take very seriously the command not to take the name of the Lord God in vain. And what that literally means, think of it like a marriage, you know, what a bride takes her husband's name. You call yourself a Christian. I don't want to invoke the name of God unless I completely mean it.
Mm-hmm.
I am, some people find fault with this. There are times when I don't particularly care to have a prayer before a meal because we do it without really thinking about it. We do it because that's what we do, and we mouth the words and we go on. I never want to take God for granted or lightly. And when I hear a group of people that I know are clearly not in subjection to God mumble the words without thinking it under God, that gives me a problem. And I have the same problem when I hear the oath. And one other thing about the oath that always irritates me is they begin with, I do solemnly swear or affirm. Okay, you're not supposed to read back swear or affirm. You choose one of those terms. Either you swear or you affirm. And the reason is there is a scriptural prohibition against swearing by any other name. And so that provision was put in there so that a Christian could not violate that principle and still comply with the oath. So I do solemnly affirm. In other words, my word is my bond. I've affirmed this. That's where it is. So those two things I have to throw out there. I think it's sad, and it is probably fatal that this nation has stepped so far away from God.
Oh, it's going to be fatal, all right.
Yeah, and that's an issue.
Okay.
I've probably said enough.
All right, so here we go. I do take exception to your comments, Representative. Here's why. And maybe we should back up. Now, Tony, maybe you're right. I would have to look into that, whether it's been removed or not.
Yeah,
but
I honestly don't know for sure.
I will
remember.
say this, that it was never originally there in the first place.
Same way with under God in the...
So it was George Washington who first used that phrase, "So help me God." When he took the presidential oath of office, he added that himself. And so ever since then, and this is something you have to understand about George Washington. Why didn't we have term limits? Okay, and I'm going to get back to the original point here. One of the reasons why we didn't originally have term limits is George Washington was so loved and so revered that there really was a public sentiment to where, you know, if somebody suggested running for a third term, most people would say, "Who the heck do you think you are? Do you think you're better than George Washington? I mean, come on." And so, I mean, that's one of the reasons why it was never in there. But the secondary reason for that is we already have term limits. They're called elections. But it was George Washington that inserted the "So help me God" in the oath. Now, the part of your, and I get your perspective, Ken, I just happen to disagree with it. Whether you think you are under God or not, it doesn't really matter what you think because you are under God. And you, in the end, you are going to be judged accordingly. And you're right. I do say that a country that has killed 64 million babies is clearly not following the word of God. But in the end, he is going to deal with that. And so whether somebody believes it is or not, and I think that we are in a post-Christian society right now, that the majority of people that are living in our country probably are not Christian. And to some degree, we're an anti-Christian country as well. But that does not negate the fact that God was there in the beginning. He is the one that allowed this country to become what it has. And in the end, he's the one that's going to fix it. Yep. Now, when it gets to candidates, Now, this one, I do sympathize with your position that I find it a little bit offensive when I hear a legislator who I know is not following the good book say, "So help me God." Okay, well, if you're taking the Lord's name in vain, you're going to be judged accordingly for that. And, God does not miss those things. And so if you're the person that stands up there and cavalierly says, "So help me God," well, then that's your choice. And I think, too, that the oath of office is not necessarily only constrained to the person taking the oath. I think it is for your constituents also. So both of those, to where, okay, this person is swearing to me that he or she is going to do these things. And whether they believe in God or not is kind of immaterial to the question, because you're going to be judged by him, and all the things that you just swore to are going to be guaranteed by God, that you are saying, "I will do these things." Mm-hmm. And so if you don't, well, then you're going to pay the price because you just broke a promise that you made. And so, the Pledge of Allegiance, okay, one nation under God. Okay, yeah, I think that we are under God. Now, whether we act accordingly or not, well, in the end, we're going to pay the price for that. But I think that it's, should you swear to God if you don't believe it? No, that's not going to turn out good for you. But yeah. I mean, when you understand the history of it, that phrase was added by George Washington. Now, I know that, it's often repeated, but...
Phrase was also added in the pledge, I think, in the 1950s.
Sure.
Is when that came about.
But that would be my response.
And I appreciate your response. And this is why it's fun to have a debate, because there's a little bit of back and forth. Sure. And my response to that is there has always been in Christendom, even in Judaism, an idea that you do not create an opportunity to trip your brother. Mm. And by requiring someone who is outside of Christ to make those words or say those words, in my view, is akin to causing them to stumble. And I take a problem with that.
I think the astute politician should probably realize they shouldn't swear that to God then.
Well, they should, in which case you're unable to say the oath, and they shouldn't be allowed to.
Well,
to
this is a big debate with a lot of people. Hey, these people took this oath and they're not following it. What do we do then? I've heard a lot of people. Yeah. I've probably made that argument before. Hey, look, you're not following the oath. All right. Well, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to wrap up the program. So back in a minute. Are you sick to death of being told what to think? Maybe you don't even realize that it's happening. Freedom Caucus bad, big spending, big government, liberal, Republican good. Conservatives are bad and they want to starve little children. I have heard it all, my friends. We are way past the time when the news was just the news, if it ever was. But wouldn't it be nice if you had a news platform that was at least honest about what they were telling you? News on the news page, opinion on the opinion page. That's exactly what the Open Range Record is. Go to the website, openrangerecord.com. News, analysis, opinion, and investigative journalism. One more time, that website is openrangerecord.com. You can listen and watch Cowboy State Politics live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble every Tuesday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pay attention to all that other block-headed, Borg-like so-called news if you want. But if you want to get the real story, watch Cowboy State Politics live. And now, back to the program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm your host, David Iverson. Almost always right 99% of the time. And in my little fiefdom, it's 100% of the time. But, sometimes there has been an occasion or two where I thought I was wrong, but I made a mistake.
A legend in his own mind.
I am a legend in my own mind. Yes. And in several other
You're also an expert.
Yes.
Yeah, you know what an expert is? Has been, drip under pressure.
Oh, yes. It's definitely not a has-been, though. So, we haven't talked a lot. We don't talk a lot of movies on the program.
There's a good reason for that.
Yeah, well, most of them are crap that comes out now. Yeah. Now, one I have been wanting to watch. That is not the right soundbite. But it might be fitting though. Maybe that was God saying, David, push this button. This is the one I meant to push. Steven Spielberg says that Disclosure Day will leave Christians questioning their faith in God. And I quote, half a century after Steven Spielberg challenged audiences with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he's again challenging accepted precepts of faith and singular belief in a supreme being. His new film, Disclosure Day, sees him revisit the possibility of aliens. I absolutely think that they have been here and that they are here, he outlined in an interview with CBS News. First, he outlined the themes behind his, and I'm constantly amazed at the cost of movies. $115 million created it. Disclosure Day is about how, if somebody had the power and if somebody had possession of the entire archive of visual evidence of what's been happening over the last 80 years, what would happen if they decided to do a data dump across the entire world all at once, Steven Spielberg said, adding, it is as much a chase movie as it is a reflection on our very being. Quote, and the people who are trying to stop the data dump from happening. That is basically the core of this chase movie. So in the movie Disclosure, and I haven't seen it yet, I want to, but getting my beautiful wife to go watch a movie that's a little bit spacey-wacy is sometimes a challenge. She doesn't like any science fiction stuff. This one I might get away with because there are some documents that the government is hiding. A couple of questions here. First, why is the government hiding all of these documents if indeed they have evidence that we've been visited by extraterrestrials? Why hide it? Well, it could be a throwback to when Orson Welles first published War of the Worlds. That created a panic. People thought that they were listening to a radio broadcast, and really they were listening to a story. But it did create a panic, and so maybe that's the reason why all these things are kept secret. But I think the larger point is there are some people in our government that think that maybe the little people can't handle it. Because, and here's another thing, man. When you remember, I guess it was last year when it was all this stuff coming out. Hey, there's more evidence of aliens or, that we've been visited. And you would think that would be like huge headlines on the front of the New York Times, but most people were like, yeah, oh well, no big deal, not really worried about it. Well, so what would happen then if all of that evidence in quotation marks, videos, whatever, was just dumped all at once, what do you think would happen, Ken? You think people could handle it? You think they'd freak out? What do you think would happen there?
Well, obviously, it's going to depend on what's in the dump.
Sure. Let's say it's astounding. What do you think would happen? Theorize with me.
I'm thinking about several things. You remember the original Battlestar Galactica?
Of course.
So I got to get the right button there. You remember the hot chick that was actually just a droid?
Yes.
So you start looking at if it's astounding, and you're looking at maybe all the things you thought before aren't,
Yes.
and undoes all of that. What's going to be? I think there's going to be an awful lot of denial.
Okay. No, this isn't real. The government made it up type of stuff.
Yeah, we'll look at the lunar landings and those
Okay,
sorts of things.
all
There's
right.
always plenty of people on that side. I think it would be hard to change the way things are with a revelation like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true. There are a lot of people that don't think we went to the moon. We did, by the way. And there's always the skeptics out there that, oh, that didn't happen. The government made that up. I do think, though, that one big effect it would have is, everybody that, had their belief system set in stone. I think it would force those people who actually think and, are not just completely dead set in one way of thinking. I think that it would create, if all this stuff did come out and it was true, you would have to reassess the things that you believe about the world. That we're not alone anymore. That's a big one.
I always taught my kids, and they've heard this a gazillion times, know why you know what you know.
Yes, know why you believe.
Yeah, know what you believe and why.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important. And for example, of the aliens versus the Bible, I don't see a problem. I know there are people that would argue they have every right to be wrong, but there are so many things we don't know. Scripture was there to tell us what we needed to know in order to be at one with God, to be at peace with God. That's what it was there for. Does that exclude or preclude other civilizations? There are other things that pop into my mind. The reason I went to Battlestar Galactica is this was basically man's own creation coming back to him.
Yeah.
Star Trek did it with V'ger.
Right.
It would depend on.
Okay, well, let's see what Steven Spielberg has to say about it. There's a quick video.
Why do we care what Steven Spielberg?
Well, we don't really, but we're talking about him, so let's see what he has to say.
This truth were just known overnight. If the government announced, yes, we have been keeping this from you since 1947, that would mess up a lot of people. And the movie also takes the position of the church. What does this do to the fundamental beliefs that many of us have? And, is God our God only on this planet? Or is God a God for every system where there's civilization, intelligent life, and even developing life?
Okay, interesting question, right? I think that nobody can know the mind of God. And I also think, and I just have to throw this one out there, if there isn't intelligent life somewhere else, I think it's a heck of a lot of wasted space.
Yeah. I want to go back to know what you believe and why.
Okay.
And maybe just a little bit of my own testimony. There was a time when I was about 12, 13, when I just rejected out of hand everything that I'd been taught as a child. My father was a preacher when I was young, and some things happened that caused me to question everything.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, I like to think about things. I like to think outside the box. I like to challenge.
That's not what your opponents say.
Yeah, I know. I like to challenge things. And some of the things that I've thought about is, what if it turns out that God really was somehow a creation of man? You go back to the Tower of Babel.
Wittgenstein.
Yeah. and thought through those things and then understood why it is that I believe the way that I do. And so I say this, I don't believe you could reveal anything from the government or have a movie come out that's going to cause me to go think about something that I haven't thought at least closely about.
Are we in such a place where there's been so much stuff that's revealed that our government has done? I mean, that it's kind of like, no kidding, it was a lab leak? No, none of us would have ever thought that. Oh, so there was some problems happening at Abu Ghraib prison. Oh, yeah. We did that.
There's enough skepticism due to the history which is why I say, people challenge the lunar landing. There are certain things they'd come out with and say, okay, right.
Well, and so I don't think that, as Steven Spielberg was saying, well, is he the God only of our planet? Well, I mean, if you're a Christian and if you read your Bible, you would know that you can't understand the mind of God, that there's some things that happen that you just don't have the answers to. Often when I
There's nothing created that he didn't make.
Right. And, often when I give a prayer, it's, thank you for the little blessings, even the ones that we don't understand. Okay. You don't know what's happening up there. Nobody does. And so I think that if this sort of disclosure were to happen, I really don't think that it would be that earth shattering. I mean, I think that we'd like to look at that and say, hey, this guy's going to release all of this stuff and it's going to blow everybody's mind. Well, I don't think that we're in that place. I think more likely it would be, wow, didn't see that one coming, or, I told you so. It's going to be one of those two.
I think kind of what I'm saying is people believe what they believe a lot of times despite the facts. We've seen it when you go present facts and, I'm going to reject it out of hand, or I can't. So I don't see it making great sweeping changes because I think people believe what they believe because they do.
Well, let me throw another one at you.
Okay.
So there are some wacko liberals that we all know that these people are definitely, I guess I should have used this hand, are definitely in this category. They are wackos, like never Trumper, never going to agree with Republican types, right? I mean, we could probably list them. Bill Maher is probably on that list. Or is he? You see, there's a difference between the fundamentalist Marxist lefty and those folks who, yes, they are on the American left. Yes, they're a Democrat, but they still use that gray matter between their ears. And perhaps I would posit that Bill Maher is one of those. Ken, go ahead and play the video.
That's why you brought him up.
Bill Maher, Republicans. Go ahead and play that one. This is interesting.
Okay, let me catch up.
Yeah. You're always catching up to me. Or do you ever catch up? I don't know. See, you're just making it like feeding my ego here. Which, I mean, that's kind of your job,
I'm
right?
pushing the button and it's not wanting to respond, but it's going to. Here it goes.
Okay.
I get it, but the Charlie Kirk interview with you and him was really interesting.
Me with him here?
Yes.
I loved it.
Because...
And by the way, they're doing a documentary, and they asked if I would be in it. They said the other people they said are in it already, all, hard right-wingers. I said yes. I'm giving them 5 minutes after my taping Friday night and I told them, don't expect me to be just saying, hagiography about Charlie. I liked him as a person. I'm glad I talked to him. I do not think he was a monster. And if you look at...
Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Yep, go ahead.
Heart attack? Oh.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't turn this thing on. Okay.
If you look at his statements... I've read the full statements, of course, because everybody is only interested in getting points for their team. They mischaracterize them. But even when I read the full statement, which were accurately characterized, I still disagreed with them.
Right.
But it wasn't what they presented. Again, it's always in the middle. It wasn't as bad as they said.
Right.
But I still disagree.
Sure. But that's what I loved about the interview is that you sat there and considered things and listened to him, let him talk, and it was a really great discussion.
My little motto here is everybody's a monster till you talk to them.
Right.
Marjorie Taylor Greene came on real time. Suddenly everybody loves Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right.
Lauren Boebert, these people who come on real time, and it's like Anna Paulina Luna. Love her.
Right.
We had a great time.
Right.
Talked to her after the show. I said, if I'd only known about you what I read, I would have thought, crazy.
Right. Right.
You're not crazy.
Right.
Are we going to agree on everything? No, but not crazy, and certainly, talkable too. That is my single biggest issue with the left. They won't talk to people, including me.
Right.
Talk like really. I'm so out there. I mean, we voted for the same person.
Right.
How far out there could I be?
Right.
But they just won't. And the Republicans, they definitely are better at we'll talk.
Okay, so the point there is right at the end, and maybe I should have trimmed that video up a little bit. But so Bill Maher says that Republicans are better at looking at people they disagree with and saying, "Hey, let's sit down and talk." So is that true or not? I mean, are there some people that on the left, they scream all the time, we want to talk, but I mean, is it the Republicans that do a better job?
There are obviously exceptions to every rule, but yeah, I think in general, and I think it stems from the idea that the conservatives have, my view, the conservatives have a better respect for people. There is, these are God's creatures as well. There's, the fundamental Christian idea, and that's there. Now, there are exceptions. There are people that just get ignorant, but they're on both camps.
I think that you have to consider the place that you're at, the venue you're talking about. There are a lot of people on social media who, ostensibly are part of the right, who you cannot even suggest that maybe a Democrat was right on a particular topic, that they're so ideologically set that they won't even consider the possibility that maybe this other side might have a point. Now, if you go down to the legislature, there are times where you see the same thing. No, you're a Republican. I'm not going to talk to you, or I'm not going to agree with you. But there are a large number of them, and I would say a majority. Going out on a limb, being magnanimous, and saying that there are a large group of them that, yeah, they'll sit down and talk. Probably not going to agree with you, but at least we can have a conversation. I mean, am I right about that, Ken? Or
yeah, and I think there's still another side that we actually touched on when we were doing the interview with Nathan, and he was talking about Harriet, and he's talking about she knew the ground, and she was skilled at that. There are people on both sides that have thought very carefully about these issues, have thought them through, have worked them out. I think you and I both pretty much have done that. And so when a topic comes up, we've already thought this through. We already know where we stand in there. Now, there are those that just react, but the difference there being, in my view, conservatives are more apt to think about things and work things out in a rational one, and liberals tend to be more emotional.
Well, they have to be.
Yeah, and they react on how do I feel about that or whatever. And when you let the feelings get in the way, then you have a problem.
Well, and the reason why I say they have to is, I mean, if you're the person that believes that men can become women, and that men ought to be in women's sports, and that a little baby growing inside a womb is not really a baby. Well, if you're believing all of those things, well, you're not living in reality. And so, like, the only thing that you have available to you is to rely upon your feelings, right? You're obviously not relying on logic, because those things, it's you can't become a trout any more than you can become a giraffe.
It's very difficult to have a logical, progressive discussion with an extreme liberal, because that's not how they think.
Now, here's the question, though. Is that also the case on the extreme right? That's why I started this whole conversation with, there's a group of people online that it doesn't matter what it is, they're not going to agree with a liberal on anything.
Yeah, I think there are people like that. I've met them in the church who have their particular view of Scripture and what it says, and quite frankly, I don't think they've actually gotten into Scripture and been very carefully dissected it so they know what it does and doesn't say. It's they have a version that they have been trained, or I often relate it to the old flannel graph picture. No, he always wore a brown coat with a red sash or a red belt, and that's the way that it is. And one example I'll throw out there that's kind of fun is when you read through Genesis, Adam and Eve conceived and she bare a son. Generally considered that there were two boys, and Cain kills Abel. But what's the punishment? Wherever I go, he says, my punishment is too much. But wherever I go, people will hate me. Where'd those people come from? So you have to be very careful. And sometimes we have an overly simplistic idea, thinking that this is the way the Bible paints a picture and this is what it says, when really it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, you really got to think about things. And this is where I'm going with this. That if there is no other thing than the right and the left have in common, it is that you have people on either extreme that refuse to talk to one another. And in my experience, if you can find one or two things that you agree on, well, then more than likely there are other things that you can find that are in common. And if the only thing that the left and the right have in common is that we are both so ideological that, we're not going to see past the tip of our nose, well, then that is something that we have in common. I mean, that's why on this program, Ken, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, that Ken and I often have conversations of, oh, hey, can we get this person on? The last one was the new president of the university. That guy, everything that I've read about him, definitely not a conservative, but I want to talk to him. I want to find out what makes him tick and what he's going to do at the school. And, we had Kate Fox on, and I got snarled at for an hour by Carly Provenza. So, we got to be able to talk to one another.
I've got another one for you that just came up yesterday. I got a phone call from New York. I was actually in Central Park.
Okay. Walking through Central Park.
And he wanted to talk to me about term limits. He has a program there. And we talked for quite a while. And he's going to send me some of his propaganda.
Okay.
But he's not an Article 5 Constitution person. So
Thank
he has
God.
kind of an interesting approach. And I suggested to him, I said, maybe we should have some of this discussion on the air, and he's definitely interested.
Yeah,
in that.
sounds fascinating.
So we'll get him in here. But it's much more interesting if you have a conversation between two people who don't just agree.
Oh yeah, way more interesting. All right, my friends. Well, that pretty much does it for today's edition of the program. Tomorrow is Open Line Friday. Make sure you don't miss that. And we've got don't you hit that button yet, Ken? I know I can see your finger like hovering above it.
I love to hit it because usually it makes you be quiet.
No, I'm not done yet. It's my program. Anyway, tomorrow, candidate for the United States House of Representatives, Steve Freeze, is going to be here in the studio with us. I never met the guy. I know his mom, which, I really like her. She's a very nice lady. And so he's running for Congress, and he's going to be sitting here in the studio, and we'll talk to him at 9 o'clock. So don't miss Open Line Friday, and don't miss that.
We're not done, though. We have another guest in studio
we
tomorrow.
do? That's
true.
Right.
Yes. One X.C. Brown from down there in Laramie County is traveling all the way up here to Sheridan County. Going to sit in studio with us, and I think you guys, if you haven't already heard X.C., you're in for a treat.
Yeah, X.C. Brown, I really like him. He'll be in the studio tomorrow, too. What time is he going to be here? 8:30?
He's coming in with me, so.
Oh, all right. So
he may be a fly on the wall for a while, but
all right. Well, maybe we'll talk to him at like 8:15. So we got a lot going on tomorrow. You don't want to miss the program. It's going to be a large time. See you tomorrow, my friends. Have a good afternoon.